I guess we're live. We are live. 3 seconds. Faking of the president. Look who's here. I'm Peter Carlaftes, the editor, and we have Lance Garcia. We have
Hello.
Greg Herrren and
Hello.
Erica Wright. Adam's here in New York with me. Are you still in Brooklyn?
I'm actually in Jersey City again.
You made it home. All right.
Made it home. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm happy
Nice
to
be
hear
home.
that. And how's your girlfriend doing on the home front there?
She's doing well. She works night shifts. She's a night shift nurse. She's had a few COVID patients. One of her Flora was the first one that was converted, but it's a little bit less insane now. Now that
Good.
At least up here, it's a little less insane in Jersey. Let's clarify that.
Yeah, around the country they just they didn't
a little different. Yeah.
Right, it is. Well, I'm glad to see you back home. And then we have Greg, who's in New Orleans.
Hey.
And how's it going down there?
It's, I mean, we're having our caseloads are going back up again. New Orleans is finally catching up to the rest of the state. The state, never really. But, it is what it is. And we're the whole city's probably going to be shut down again really soon. So I'm enjoying going to the office while I can.
Okay, well, enjoy that. And you might be one of the few. In fact, maybe that's how we'll bill you from now on, the one who enjoy going in. Of course, getting out of the house right now is probably a luxury for many. Are you getting out at all, Erica, or are you kind of still holed up?
Very little, and it's so hot that my dog doesn't even want to walk. So our walks are down the block, and then she starts pulling me back towards the front door in the air condition. So
I'm glad you brought that up because everybody here, all three of you, had your photos in our dog and cat days of summer yesterday. Did everyone see them, or you didn't see yours?
I
didn't
think
see
it came in.
Oh, well, it was in our newsletter. I'm sure you didn't get it, or I'll send it to you.
I got it.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yep.
So we are pushing the book, Faking of the President, which we're all in. We call ourselves a cabinet. Maybe we'll figure out which cabinet positions my three illustrious cohorts should occupy while we're here. And down below, right there, that you see along the bottom of the live stream screen is the place to order the book, The Faking of the President, 19 Stories of White House Noir. And we have three other wonderful contributors here. Adam did Andrew Jackson, and Greg Herrren has James Buchanan, and Erica Wright has Theodore Roosevelt. And we're going to go in that chronological order as we move forward with the program. How about Obama today? President Obama did some beautiful job. If you had a chance to see his eulogy for John Lewis, did you get a chance to watch that?
I was at work, so I missed it all.
No?
I saw a little bit of it, especially when he called out Trump.
He did call that out, but he was also very respectful to
John
Lewis. But when he did that, a new energy took over, and I hope that it continues to take over, but not to lessen the impact or memory of John Lewis at this moment. But that was a very powerful moment when he stood out. And let's just hope that those things are going to continue to take over as more and more people jump the ship that was never afloat. It was still in dry dock. You know what I mean? It was never taken off the stilts and put in the water, to see if it would even float, this Trump ship. And it's still sitting up there in dry dock. And it's getting ready to, and a heavy wind just going to knock it off its little pillars. And that's going to be it for him. And hopefully all three of those presidents and Carter stand there and say on January 20th, you're fired, because that would be the fitting thing. I don't even want to say anything. I just say goodbye, not even a goodbye, just goodbye. It's enough every day. How are we going to get through these last few months?
His Twitter account's not going to go away no matter what happens.
And people follow this thing. I mean, I've never looked at his Twitter page. I'm sorry, not even once.
It's probably for the best.
Yeah. I mean, I never watched Seinfeld. I'm that bad. So it's kind of like the same thing, I think. Friends, I never saw it. So I never saw Trump's Twitter page. And he doesn't have a hold on me, but he does, because here we are talking about him, because he's got a hold on all of us right now. He's saying he's going to cancel the election. What would you do down there in D.C., Erica, if he tries to do this, to postpone the election or whatever he's talking about?
I'm afraid I don't have any power at all.
Well, I'll come down there to help you, and we'll get some power, and we'll keep walking from your house.
Okay, it's pretty close. It's a pretty easy walk, and
So we could stop in there for water if some of us come down.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. We'll wear our masks.
Adam, we'll definitely be wearing masks because they won't be able to identify us. But Adam will be coming down with us, and maybe you can start working your way northeast there from NOLA there, Greg. It's just such a tough time, and with these federal thugs being sent into our cities. It started out on the day of him with the Bible down there with his photo op, and that's kind of the day that kind of started, and its popularity has been dropping ever since that day. So I guess we can be thankful for his mistakes, but that people keep jumping the ship. But it still has so much control, and we're going to be talking about other presidents who, no less, megalomaniac, maniacal, just out of their minds with power, all of them. And we've all approached this in our stories, and in one way or another, whether we want the power for information like Greg, or Jackson, who wants to live, or Teddy, who wants to continue to. We'll talk all about their power struggles with wanting more, and as we move along here. So maybe we should start. I'm going to put Greg and Erica in the green room, and there are green M&Ms there, as we found out last night. So enjoy yourself, and we'll talk a few minutes with Adam about Andrew Jackson, and we'll have him read a part of his story. Adam, how you doing? You're back home. That must be
back home. It is very nice to have some sort of something close to normalcy in these troubled times. But it is very nice to be home again, even if it's a smaller space than living in a house in Brooklyn and an apartment in Jersey City. It's still home. So
you could always go back if you wanted to for a night or two, right?
That's very, very true. But I'm trying not to, so sometimes I can.
Okay, so we have our guy Andrew Jackson, and he's one of the. What do you think? What's your?
Speak bluntly, he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I think that Andrew Jackson is one of the most racist and just terrible presidents we had. I think I'm sure, as with all presidents, there were redeeming qualities. I can't think of any that come to mind because all I can ever think about is the Trail of Tears.
Trail of Tears.
Yeah, and I have always been fascinated with a specific story that I learned way back in junior high school about an assassination attempt on Jackson's life, which was the very first time there was an assassination attempt on any American president. And what was most interesting about that story was it wasn't anything politically motivated. If you ever read the book, What Hath God Wrought, which is about the sort of era that Jackson is ascended, the assassination attempt takes up one line. It's like one sentence. It's not political. It was just someone with severe mental issues. He believed that Jackson owed him money, and that if he were to kill Jackson, he would get John C. Calhoun, if I'm not mistaken, was going to be president, and that way he could get money from the Bank of America. The man was insane. There was no political motive to it. It was just pure insanity. Yeah. But it failed, and it failed in a really interesting way. In reality, what happened was the assassin walked up to Jackson, pointed the gun straight at his head. Back then, there was one shot per gun. He fired, it misfired. Took out his other gun. He fired, he misfired, and Jackson beat the living crap out of him with his cane, and he had to be pulled off him by senators and stuff before killing the man outside of the Capitol. It is one of those just fascinating stories that if someone were to write it in a book, you would say there's no way that happened. That's implausible that both guns misfire at point blank range. And that was the inspiration for the story.
Right. Andrew Jackson, who owned himself like 200 slaves.
Yep.
And sold the Indians, give up your land, we'll give you $14. We're going to give you some new land on the other side of the Mississippi. And I think he gave a lot of the chiefs and the upper elders slaves of their own to say, look, you can be like us. Just get out of here right now. What a great guy. And one of the story here, I just wanted to say real quick that I just read, which is very similar to what could be going on here in a few months, is that he worked with his postmaster general to censor anti-slavery mailing. So any kind of anti-slavery mailing, he had his postmaster general get all his workers to destroy that mail. So we're looking at a very similar thing. It's incredible. This is 200 years ago, and we could face the same thing here with our ballots, which I don't think is going to happen. But who knows? We got a few months, and here was the guy did it 200 years ago. The first thing he could. Right,
and and Trump loves him. He's one of all the presidents. He's one of his favorites. That's why he has his bust in the Oval Office. So,
and that's why he very easily is putting the person in charge of the post office to emulate this move right here. I'm sure. So we're going to let you read a little of your story, Andrew Jackson Beats Death, and then we'll all join you in just a second when you're done. All right,
excellent. Thank you.
Enjoy Adam Lance Garcia, Andrew Jackson Beats Death.
So for those of you at home who have watched some of these, reading a different section, trying to make sure that every time you watch one of these, you get something a little bit new. As we've mentioned, this is a story called Andrew Jackson Beats Death, and it's about Andrew Jackson beating death. This section that I'm reading is later on in the story where Andrew Jackson is moving through the afterlife. What is on the far shore? The end, Death replied. Jackson's lips firmed into a line. Yes, he said, his voice tight. I had deduced that, oh Death. But what is there? What is the end? Describe it in so my human mind can understand. Death cocked his head. His black, empty eye sockets considered Jackson with curiosity. Did the specter know what Jackson planned? Did he see what he would do once the opportunity arose? Death looked to the distant shore, as if he were looking for the words to describe what he saw. The shore is different for each soul, Death replied after a time. Some see what they read in their books of faith. Others see what they lived wishing were true. Others see their dreams, but many see their nightmares. Jackson felt a shiver race down his spine. Many? Death's skeletal visage was inscrutable. Kindness is harder than cruelty. Cruelty is easy. One man has land, the other needs it. So the second kills the first. Simple. Two men sharing the land, splitting the fruits of the land and their labor. That is hard. Many choose cruelty. Too few choose kindness. Jackson scoffed. And what if the second man purchases the land? What then, eh? The first man lives, he now has currency to do with what he wishes, and the second owns the land and owes the first nothing more. Death looked away. Cruelty is easy, he repeated and said no more. The ferryman pushed off the shore and the boat listed into the river. Jackson leaned over the edge to peer into the murky depths. He couldn't see the riverbed, but he had been in deeper bodies of water before. The current seemed strong, yet swimmable. Jackson licked his lips eagerly. He could swim it, yes. For how long remained to be seen, but he was certain he could not let death and the ferryman take him to the far shore. The question now was when the right time would be to make his escape. He did not want to wait until they were halfway across the river. That would only assure his demise, doubly so as he was already, for the time being, deceased. It was now or never, Jackson decided. Without preamble, Jackson threw himself overboard, gripping his cane. The river's water was icy and bit at Jackson's skin. Jackson tried to keep his head above the surface, but his clothes quickly drank in water and pulled him down. His free hand flailed, reaching for the disappearing surface as he sank to the bottom of the river. Desperate, he tried to pull himself free of his increasingly heavy coat to no avail. Panic stabbed at Jackson's mind. The water was black as obsidian and grew impossibly darker as he sank further down, the riverbed seemingly miles below him. Were it not for the faint sensation of gravity and water moving over his body, Jackson would have believed himself suspended in space. There was no fear of drowning, only the dread that he may spend eternity lost to the current. It was only when he felt something grab hold of his coat that Jackson realized the full consequences of his decision. At first believing it to be some branch or rocky protrudent on the riverbed, Jackson tried to use his cane to wrench free. But his efforts aided little, and whatever had caught hold of him was now pulling him down further. Twisting his body, Jackson saw what caught hold of him, and he, were he able, would have screamed in terror. Holding him down was what looked like a young woman, eyes and mouth stretched beyond human limits in abject horror and desperation. Jackson could almost hear her wordless screams, her pleas for release. He understood, somehow, that she was trying to bring him down, but rather trying to pull herself up. It wasn't panic, Jackson. In a panic, Jackson brought his cane down upon her slender, pale white, shimmering fingers, failing as before to loosen his grip. He then felt something else grab a hold of the other end of his coat. Turning to the source, Jackson saw another pale white horror grasping for release. The entire riverbed was filled with these luminous, panicking beings, all of them reaching out, screaming for release that would never come. Jackson knew that if they were to pull him down, he'd be trapped alongside them for eternity, lost in a nice nightmarish limbo beneath these black waters. Seeing no other choice, Jackson let go of his cane and began to struggle out of his coat. The weight of it was immense, its waterlogged fibers clinging to his person. With each second he struggled, he could feel the wraiths below him pull him closer to the riverbed. Were his heart still beating, it would have thundered in his ears. No coherent thoughts passed through his mind as the red light of panic seemed to envelop his whole person. Jackson's right hand slipped to the cuff of his coat, and it was enough for him to wriggle his shoulder free. Twisting and turning his body, Jackson was able to free himself like a crustacean shedding its shell. Suddenly, feeling 100 pounds lighter, Jackson began to swim towards the surface. The subtle, terrifying glow of the beings filling the riverbed, his only guide as to what was up or down. He did not know how long he'd been swimming when his head finally reached the surface. He gasped, not out of need for air, but out of sheer panic. Treading water, Jackson tried to make sense of his surroundings. There was no sign of death or the ferryman, nor could he see any sign of either shore. The current, invisible and powerful, had pulled him far downstream. He had no way of knowing how far, but where the river had once been placid and mirrored surface, there was now turbulence and white water. Jackson could feel himself being pulled with the current, the roar of rushing water growing louder in his ears. Struggling to stay above the waterline, Jackson could barely see a few feet ahead of him and did not see the sharp end of the approaching horizon. Not until a deafening thunder of the waterfall surrounded him did Jackson realize what was going to happen. Jackson tried to swim in either direction, but it was no use. Seconds later, he was tumbling over the edge of the waterfall into the infinite night. that is my little section there.
Very good. It's a perfect place to leave it. And of course, our book is The Faking of the President. Let's bring back Erica. They've eaten all the green M&Ms, as I
That's
said
okay.
last night.
I'm more of a brown M&M guy anyway.
Okay. So we do have The Faking of the President tonight. And what we're celebrating on this run is we did get a review in the New York Times book review.
That's
and
right.
There's the cover, which was a very interesting cover. I thought it was a very powerful cover, and I'm very honored to be inside the pages of this cover. Did you all get your copies?
Indeed.
In the mail? Very good, very good. I'm glad. I'm so happy, and I'm honored to have worked with you and for all of you to be a part of making this happen. I don't think many anthologies get pulled into the time, so we're really, really honored. And I'm proud of all of us, grateful to us all. Now, we also had two other people on our panel today. We had Christopher Chambers, who's tied up he's a professor at Georgetown, and he had some COVID meetings as they're coming back and bringing people into the classroom, which I think is, just what do you think of this, bringing people into the classrooms now? Do you really think it's what should happen, Greg?
Well, I don't have kids, so
yeah,
I don't.
But
have
even
any...
so, just of your opinion of
I can imagine. I sympathize. I sympathize with parents who've been stuck home with their kids all this time. I can understand the need and the want to get free of that again, but I also kind of enjoy a cruel laugh at everyone's expense who always told me I'd regret not having kids. We've got the last laugh now, right?
Well, you do for now.
So,
you never know. One might show up at your door. You know what I'm saying?
Not likely.
Not likely. Okay.
Not likely, but you
never donated or anything, huh?
No.
Okay. And Erica, what do you say about going back into the classroom?
Well, I like Greg. I am sympathetic to the parents, and not just because of they've been home with their kids, but they're losing out on a lot of experiences.
Yes.
Excuse me. And I think especially I felt very sorry for the seniors in high school this past spring, kind of missing all of those milestones, and disappointment. I think at that age is so hard. I feel like once you get a little older, disappointment is just part of life. But I think to be 18 and on the cusp of all of these exciting moments and then to have them suspended. But yeah, I mean, I teach entirely online, and I have for several years now, but I can't imagine being going into, say, a Georgetown classroom right now, even though DC is actually doing pretty well in terms of our numbers.
Right.
I would personally be scared. COVID's a nasty disease. It's a nasty virus, whether or not it's fatal, or you just have some of these terrible, well, I hate to call them side effects because they're part of the, part of this actual virus. So I personally would not want to go back into the classroom, and it would be terrible to be put into that position of having to, because your livelihood depends on it.
Yeah, I agree. Am I echoing?
A little bit.
Am I? I wonder why. Let's see what's happening. Let me. Am I echoing now? Yes. How about Eric? Echoing?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I am again. So, Erica, you're on the echo. What am I going to do here? How are we going to handle this?
Is it my connection somehow causing?
Well, it's me.
Echo?
Now I've stopped. Okay,
Yeah,
good. We're good. We're good right now. All right, we made it somehow by switching around. Anyhow, Nope, it's come back. So now it's.
Just think of it as more Peter for you to hear.
Yay! So anyhow, this is the New York Times. Faking of the President tour. This is our third night, and we did have Chris Chambers, who had James Madison, and I was so excited to bring this particular point up about James Madison. Just goes to how far politicians will go, or the people who rule the country will go to make things seem good, and that we should all move on. Is that he was dying, and it was in June of 1836. He's on his deathbed. This is James Madison. It's June of 1836. And the doctors are sitting there, and everybody, they're giving him stimulants. They're giving him like speed to keep him alive until July 4th, because Jefferson, John Adams, and James Monroe all died on July 4th. And they were just wanting him to keep alive on speed to be alive, so he would die on July 4th, just like those other great presidents. And it was James Madison said, "Get out of here! I don't want any speed." And he died June 28th. But these other three cats did die on July 4th, and I wonder if they kept them alive. You know what I mean? How did that really go down?
I know that Jefferson and Adams, that was just a weird coincidence, because I believe it was Adams who passed second, but he thought Jefferson still lived. He said Jefferson still lives when he passed away.
Right. They died in the same day, though.
The same day. So Jefferson passed, but Adams thought Jefferson was still alive and said Jefferson still lives. And some people at the time, or for a while, thought it was like because they had become bitter rivals, but they, over the course of their lives, reconciled, and they ended as friends. So he's like, it was less about, oh, I'm mad that Jefferson's still alive. It was Jefferson still lives because there's hope.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a feel-good story, and you know, it's better than giving him speed to just lay there so he could die on this day. I mean, come on, wake up then. And then also we had Kate Flora on the bill tonight, who's couldn't make it because maybe computer connection, but 3 days ago, if you read in the paper up in Bailey Island, Maine, there was a shark attack and a woman was killed in the water. And this is 2 doors down from her vacation home. So she's a little shaken up by that, as we all would, as she was just swimming there a little bit earlier in the day. So that would shake anybody to the core. Yikes. And, you know, I couldn't believe it when the paper and I saw Bailey Island. I said, because I visited her, and you drive up this little road, it's impossible to pick this particular place. And it just goes to show you, you know, Al Gore was right with global warming. Give him another Nobel Prize. And let's do something about it now. Let's somehow stop this, because they're moving, sharks are moving up into Maine. I was there last year, and they had a shark warning and closed the beaches down. So this is global warming. This is a big problem. This is something that Herr Trump hasn't addressed in the least. In fact, he's taken away all the controls and regulations, so that things can just get worse and quick. It could be quickly. Luckily, right now we have a pandemic where there's nobody driving, nobody doing this. So we've leveled off, kind of, don't you think? Maybe the pandemic itself came into be to save us from Trump and his you know, not as a democratic ploy, but as an actual. And then the animals, I think, are saying, good for the pandemic. Get rid of people. We've got our world back. There's a lot of things going on right now with this pandemic, but we do have to wait and get a vaccine before, like, we open schools and open up the country again to an everyday life. And we're going to have to get by. They closed off our pandemic insurance, and they're discussing it now. Like, come on, man, get off of it. You know, they got 1/3 of what they were giving people here in this country. It's just not what needs to happen. So hopefully it's all going to be changed here in 3 months. And that's what we did with our book, The Faking of the President, 19 Stories of White House Noir. We gave all of the other presidents, if they had acted with the same impunity as, say, Trump, which we find out if you dig into their lives and the politicians around them, they did. You know what I mean? That's why this isn't anything new. It's just we've got Twitter. We've got a Twitter feed that is kind of feeding. How many millions does he have? 5.6 million, 50 million? I don't know. I can't even conjecture. How many? Does anyone have a figure? I'm glad. Thank you. Thanks for. We're uninformed and happily here. We don't know how many Twitter followers Trump boss tweet, I like to call him.
More than you. I'll put it this way: there's more than you'd like, but less than Obama. So there you go.
Good. Well, let's hope Obama's heard a lot more in the next month and 2 and 3 of his.
Significantly less than Obama.
How many? That's how many he has? Oh, Kat Georges is our the person behind the curtain, and she just said 85 million. This guy has 85. Who? No, Obama or
Obama has 120 million.
Good. Well, that's better. But how could this guy have 85 million? You know.
How are there that many people on Twitter?
I don't know.
I think if you had asked me to guess, I would not have said 120 million.
No, I wouldn't have either.
Yeah. So anyway, Kate, our hearts go out to you, and get well, and we're condolences for the loss of the neighborhood. And it's just a beautiful place up there. Who could figure something like that could happen? But we love you. And she was the last. She would have been last FDR, Huey Long, excuse me. So I don't have any fun facts for them because for FDR we talked about it last 2 nights ago with SJ with her FDR story. But why don't we move on with Greg? We've got James Buchanan, number 15, preceded Lincoln, and more than likely, who knows if he was his first, but certainly one of America's gay presidents. So let's bring Gary. I'm putting you. You got the brown M&Ms. They'll be there for you, Adam, and Erica. Hang loose. We'll be back with Teddy soon. All right, Greg. Hello.
All right. Hey.
All right. Nola. And the numbers are going up. That's so bad. I'm sorry to hear that. And, New York's still kind of staying down, but who knows?
We're still not as bad as the rest of the state, but
yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's good.
Small miracle.
So anyhow, James Buchanan, he had his fellow, what was William Rufus King? That was his
Senator King.
Yeah, senator. He was a senator from the South. And of course, James Buchanan was Pennsylvania, the only president from Pennsylvania in our 45. And they called each other Miss Nancy and Aunt Fancy. This is what I found out today. He passed away in 1853, which was, I think, before Buchanan took office.
Buchanan, 1857.
57 in March. And then, of course, there was the panic of 1857 right away from some of his doing. Dred Scott decision, a lot of bad things he did as a president. Just a lot of wrong decisions. Plus, he was still placating the South, even after losing his lover, who he did always work toward placating the South through his political career, becoming president at that time. I think he shouldn't have done that. It definitely catapulted us into the Civil War. His work at that time as a president. The one thing I also learned about him is that he did have a love affair with a woman early on in his career, and they split up, and she committed suicide a little later, and her father wouldn't let James Buchanan come to the funeral. Now, I can't really find out more about that, but that's an interesting moment. You would think in his future to be, but it wouldn't let him come to the funeral of, and whatever didn't go right in the relationship. I guess it took her, it was harder on her than on him.
No, he was not a. It was one of those things where they romanticized the story at the time, or later historians. That's what the whole point of my story was, is that to cover up all of that shit, the stuff that was not palatable for a Christian country. They covered it all up and basically made it sound like he he never loved another woman because his heart was broken when she died, and that's
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
because that,
maybe they sewed that into the fabric of
yeah, it's like
keeping them out of the
it's
in the
really
closet.
yeah, it's really interesting. There's I've been reading up on some New Orleans history, and like they call them the five bachelor philanthropists, five wealthy men who in the 19th century who built schools, libraries, did all kinds of things, but none of them ever married, and every single one of them had the same story, that their heart had been broken when they were younger and they never could love another woman. Like,
Right.
okay. There's something more going on there than that, but haven't been able to get into the archives, obviously, with everything that's going on, to start looking at stuff more interesting. But it's an interesting the five bachelor philanthropists of New Orleans, all from the same time period.
And the same story.
And the same story
background story.
as James Buchanan. Yeah.
Yes. And then we lead into your story, the Dreadful Scott decision, where yours is the only one that takes place outside of its time, and no president it was hurt in the reading of the story because he's not there. So yeah. So we'll turn it over to you, Greg Herrren, and the Dreadful Scott decision, number 15, James Buchanan.
All right, so I'm going to read from a different part of the story than I read the last time I did a reading from the story. I'm going to move on a little bit to where my character, who's a PhD candidate studying James Buchanan, and his dissertation thesis is that Buchanan was a homosexual, and that was why he was so pro-slavery. Is more complicated than that, and the woman that Peter was talking about, he had her letters and he kept them his entire life. And when he died, the executors of his will were instructed to burn the letters. And so they were lost to history. And apparently, and now my PhD candidate has heard from someone who claims to have the letters, the actual physical copy letters themselves. So here we go. He stared at the computer screen, his heart pounding. It was almost too good to be true. He clicked on the attachment, which was a PDF of a yellow brittle page with elegant handwriting. It was hard to read. The scan wasn't a high enough resolution to view larger, so he could actually read the words. But he could read the signature at the bottom plainly enough. Anne Caroline Coleman. He clicked on the reply button, wrote a quick response, and hit send. If he had $1 for every time someone had asked him, why James Buchanan, since he entered grad school at the University of California, San Felice, he'd never have to work another day in his life. He wouldn't need the PhD he was working towards, the same PhD that made his mother roll her eyes and use air quotes whenever she talked about it, the usual same supportive self she'd always been his entire life. Nor would he be worried about eventually scoring tenure at the University of California, San Felice. His future would, indeed, be secured. A few weeks later, he was pulling his battered old Honda Civic into the driveway of a decaying old house in the mountains up near Rocky Beach, about an hour or so up the coast from San Felice. Never once had the question of what Harriet Coleman Reed wanted in exchange for the letters come up. He feared that she might want money. The value of the letters were inestimable. That's hard to say. The letters might not change anything, but the proven homosexuality of a president? Maybe the letters would be the basis for an argument of some sort that his sexuality and the societal biases against it in the 19th century might have shaped who he was and his presidency. The long friendship and close living quarters with Senator Rufus King of Alabama certainly played a role in Buchanan's opinions on slavery and emancipation. But now that his car was bumping along the dirt driveway and he could see that the yard was overgrown and the house itself was dilapidated and in need of repair, he became more certain the old money would want some money for her prize. Her emails implied she was most interested in correcting the historical record. It's time for the world to know the truth, she said in her last email. He knew he shouldn't get his hopes up before reading them, and there was the authentication process to get through, but wouldn't she have asked about money before he drove up there? He pulled up alongside the house and turned off his engine. An ancient Chevrolet was parked by the dilapidated barn, the field beyond dead, fallow, and barren. A tawny cat blinked at him from the back corner of the house as he got out of the car. It yawned and vanished in an instant. The steps to the porch moaned and groaned beneath his feet as he climbed them. The peeling front door opened before he could raise his hand to knock. "Ah, Mr. Diviney, a few minutes early," the old woman at the door clucked, her wrinkled and tired-looking face creasing into a smile. Her white hair was pulled back tightly into a severe bun, pulling the face of her skin tighter. He wondered how far her skin would drop as she loosened the bun. Her blue eyes behind the wire-rimmed glasses were sharp, though, as she stepped aside so he could enter the dark interior of the house. She was very short, barely 5 feet tall if he had to guess, and thin. Her shoulders hunched forward and her body seemed shapeless under the folds of the enormous dark blue house dress. She led him into a darkened living room. The curtains were closed, the only light cast by yellow candle-shaped bulbs in a chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Every available surface seemed to be covered with knickknacks of some kind, most of it tourist garbage collected, apparently, over the course of a lifetime. Plastic snow globes depicting various sites throughout the country, polished seashells, little brass replicas of the Statue of Liberty, the Brooklyn Bridge, Mount Rushmore, and various other pieces of Americana. The wallpaper was faded and water-stained in places. Yellowish-brown water stains marred the dusty ceiling. An enormous ancient television console was shoved up against one wall. He sat down on the couch. The cushions were covered in plastic that squeaked under his jeans. She sat down in a rocking chair and crossed her legs at the ankles. "It's time, I think, for the letters to be made public." He tried not to let his emotion show on his face. It was all he could do not to snatch them out of her hands and run for the front door. "You have a lovely home," he replied politely, forcing his eyes up to meet hers. "Don't let her know how important they are to you." She snorted. "It's a dump. Flattery isn't going to get you these letters, Mr. Diviney." "Scott," he replied automatically, the way he did whenever someone called him Mr. Diviney. He forced another smile onto his face. "Please, call me Scott, Mrs. Reed. How much do you think these letters are worth?" "Well, that's hard to quantify." He broadened his smile despite the sinking feeling in his heart. "I should think the letters proving that our nation had a homosexual president would be worth a great deal to a great many people," she smiled back at him. "For different reasons, of course. But make no mistake, they have value." She nodded. "If I simply gave these to you, you'd make a fortune using them to write a book. And what about the poor widow woman who gave them to you? Doesn't she deserve something for helping make you famous?" His voice sounded a million miles away. "What do you want, Mrs. Reed?" The smile was predatory. He could see that now. And that's it. I'll stop there.
All right. He wants those papers. So much need for power just continues, and there's even power inside the knowledge about wanting power. You know, it just doesn't stop. That's what I dug about your story. You know, that how it fit in with this in a satirical way too, but in a real way about what the power is.
Yeah, it's amazing. Historical information, undiscovered historical information actually does have a lot of value, and it has a lot of power. It can change how history's written, and
absolutely.
And that's why I always am. That's why whenever I read things like about how Buchanan's letters were burned, or how Martha Washington burned George Washington's letters after he died, it's like, all that history, all that information gone forever. But that's also, why they wanted them burned. They didn't want people to know their secrets.
Well, we're going to bring back our Adam and Erica. And Buchanan was a strange cat in the fact that he sounds a lot like Trump, a little more eloquent. I have him here, a speech he gave, and he basically said in his first annual message, this is in December 1857, when the panic of 1857 hit, and it was as bad as any time in this country. And you think about it back then and what little resources they had, ultimately, especially in the rural areas. I mean, people were in trouble. And he said that the federal government could do nothing, and he sympathized with the travails, but he could do nothing for individual suffering. adding that that youth and energy of the rugged American individuals would triumph, though there would clearly be an interim of rough times. So it sounds pretty familiar, you know. It sounds, you know, a connection to what they're telling us now, taking away the
yourself
pandemic.
up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
No handouts. Yeah.
Yep. And your guy Trump. I mean, you're Andrew Jackson. Trump had this to say. He said, Andrew Jackson, a little later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. You know, he was a tough person. He was really angry, and with regard to the Civil War, he would have said, "There's no reason for this." People don't realize, you know, the Civil War. If you think about it, why? People don't ask that question. Why was there a Civil War? Why could that not have been worked out? You know,
Jackson was dead.
The difference between that's true. The difference between
he was long dead by then.
Buchanan is trying to paint a big picture of great individual, rugged Americans. And I don't know that Trump could put those three words together. You know, I don't think he's capable of that.
No.
Yeah, what a time we're living in. And a lot of people out there demonstrating and resisting and looking for social and racial reform and of course proving that Black lives do matter and it's just a time of true change here, and we've got to be part of that. We have to just continue, and through November we will be. And we can't just take Joe Biden, who really did nothing to change the racial or social reform in his time of power, especially when he was him and Bill Clinton passed that bill, or he was a part of passing Clinton's bill that kept a lot of people of color in prison. So we've got to make sure that there is going to be change this time, and we're just not going to, sleepwalk until the next 10 killings and murders of people of color and say, "Oh yes, we care." This is a different time. We're feeling that. Of course, John Lewis said Emmett Till was the George Floyd of his time, and a lot of change did occur, but a lot of time went by without change, and he played, he fought the good fight and all throughout. But we've all got to put in there, and we've got to be a part of that change. And thus, the faking of the president uses satire to expose, the failings of power and the failings of this country. Whatever the race being our original sin. We need to definitely rectify that, and that's a big part of Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt. I think his failings, where he did a lot of good, but in his failings were more racial inequity, just cast upon all races, not only Black Americans, but the Spanish American War, those sort of things, Spanish American War, Hawaii, and then wanted to utilize the Spanish, saying that they were whiter than the Asians, and all kinds of things that were going on then that just don't play today in anyone's head. How could people be thinking this way? I start stammering. I've done this 3 nights in a row when I just get so frustrated to just blah, just come out all over, and maybe it would be better. Maybe we all need to do that, and I don't know. What do you think, Greg? What do you think about our moment here?
It's very easy to think that the time we live in is the worst time ever.
Yes.
I mean, I've always worried. I always worried that we would head this way at some point in my life, that we would wind up here again, where we are now. Americans have such a, I guess maybe it's because we're such a young country in the scheme of things worldwide, that we've never ever had much of a sense of our own history, and our history actually has never really been realistically taught.
Sure.
I was raised on the mythology, the American mythology of, everyone's going to, each generation does better than the generation before, and if you work really hard, you're going to have a really good life, and you can own your own home, and you can do all of this. And my parents actually lived that. My parents my mom grew up without indoor plumbing and without electricity, without a phone. My dad was the same way, and now they live in a $750,000 home. They were able to make that become real to them, but not so much my generation. And each generation after mine, it's progressively less likely that you're going to not be buried in debt for your entire life and not really have anything, and one paycheck away from losing everything. And it's sad. It's really, really, really sad. And I understand why people always, you see this stuff online all the time about angry millennials. It's like, well, I don't blame them for being angry. They were told if they took on all this debt, they would have good jobs, and this is what their future was. And it was basically a lie. I went to college. My tuition when I went to college, I don't know how old Erica and Adam are, but they look way younger than me. But my first semester of college, I went to Kansas State University, and the tuition was $750 for the semester. I mean, my parents wrote a check for my college tuition and gave me, here's $100, go buy your books. And I had money left over. I tell that story to kids that, the young kids at work that I work with, and they just look at me like, oh my God. And I said, yeah.
now the textbook costs $750.
Yeah. It's like student loans, student loan was something you got if you were really absolutely desperate. I mean, you could actually get a job. You could work your way through school. When I went to college, you could make enough money working part-time and working in the summer to pay for tuition and pay for your expenses in the fall, that you didn't have to go into debt. And this is how old I am. The whole idea of college students having credit cards was an alien concept. Credit was incredibly difficult to get in the 1970s. Incredibly difficult to get. Women couldn't get credit cards on their own. They had to. My mom's first credit card was Mrs. my dad's name. It didn't even have her name on it. It was Mrs. And it's just astonishing. There became this whole push in the 70s when the economy started to go down the tubes in the 70s, and then in the 80s, that what we need to do is have everyone go into debt and spend money to drive the economy.
Well, that's what Reagan did with speculative economy. No more.
Yeah.
We were talking about this last night, wherein a lot of black leaders were, starting in the 60s. Of course, they were assassinated, but in the 70s they started in union leaders, and all of a sudden, what could we do? Well, we make the unions impotent, and we start a speculative economy, and there's no more manufacturing economy, and thus that's where we're at right now. And we definitely have the great Reaganomics to thank for that. What about you, Adam, the angry millennial? Let's hear what the angry millennial has to say about this.
Am I millennial?
Do you think, or are you not?
I think I'm like on the cusp. It's like,
Did it hurt?
It did. No, it's weird. I was very lucky. My parents were able to put all three of their children through college, which allowed me
your children. Is that like a family secret or something?
No.
Families come up with those
the only children I have right now are furry. For us, we were able to enter the workplace without debt, which has been a blessing. And also, I spent so much of my life as a freelancer working in entertainment, that it forced you to be frugal. So while I do have credit card debt, that's usually paid off right away. But it's weird. Like, you're raised, when you're raised in the 80s and the 90s, you're still at this period of time, like American exceptionalism, like America's great and everything is, no
Credit
matter what you
limit
do.
wise, yeah.
No, not even that. Like,
No?
just in terms of just you could do anything, and like, and I think over the course of my life, that myth has quickly unraveled. I think, I'm the generation that had 9/11 happen when I was just really coming of age, and that sort of like you go, there's a before and after. You can start seeing like the seams start showing. And while there was a really big bit of hope during the Obama, like when Obama was elected, and while he wasn't a perfect president, he was no president is, but compared to Trump, I mean, he might as well, I think the biggest thing is that what's been interesting, at least for 2020, which has been a difficult year for everyone in various ways, I think it's what I hope is that we're seeing the seams rip in the jacket of America, but that it means that we can sew it back up. That if we're learning what's wrong, we're figuring out why it's wrong. I think my generation and younger are speaking up, and they're speaking up loudly. They're as a Hispanic Jew who passes as white. I'm a cis white male. I've had the white experience, but I am of Hispanic origin. You become very aware of the privileges that you're afforded, while at the same time, those of your same demographic don't get that. And I don't think those are conversations that were even happening when I was a kid. Those are not conversations that were happening even as I was a young adult. The fact that I can sit here and, really be aware of how my own white privilege and the things that I've been able to get through and do, because people look at me and they're like, oh, you're white, so we're not going to stop you on this as you're crossing the street, yeah, oh, you have a Garcia last name? Oh, okay. Well, you don't look Hispanic. You don't sound Hispanic. I don't think, if I would shine any line of hope to what's going on right now, is sometimes, as it's said, sometimes it's darkest before the dawn. And I feel like that might be what's going on. I hope that's what's happening. Peter, you mentioned it earlier, the pandemic sort of highlighted everything. And I think if there's any hope, that we all thought Trump would be taken down by some kind of scandal, that he would do this, do that, and like he would get caught and taken down. And I think what's been fascinating about the pandemic is what's taking Trump down is his own ineptitude, the fact that he's really just shitty at his job. No. And that's forced people to sort of confront the reality of the situation, confront the realities of America.
Yep, you're right. Like you were talking about taking that ripped garment, but we can't use the same fabric. We've got to come up with some new fabric for all of us. To all be woven in to this garment that we all wear and wear at the same time and in the same place. But you're right, and good for you. What is your nationality on the Hispanic side, the Latinx?
So my father's Puerto Rican,
all right,
and my mother is European Jew. We're Juricans.
Sure.
Juricans. They're the most, like, as someone once shouted at me, Juan Epstein, basically. So
your mother is Jewish, right?
My mother
there
is
you
Jewish.
go. So you're, it's like,
yeah. So I'm Jewish. I think I'm sort of somewhere in between. Like, I really hope there's something out there. I just think that I also benefited from the fact that because my father's Catholic, my mother's Jewish. Both of them were they pushed to be understanding of other faiths. I was able to go to a mosque when I was younger and learn about Islam, which helped me be more understanding of, I think, a lot more understanding than a lot of people were after 9/11. I was like, well, no, that's not what Islam stands for. Like, no, Muslims are not all just this horrible idea that you have. And, you know, in the same way that, like, because we welcomed people of such diversity of color, of gender, and of sexuality into our home as I grew up, it allowed me to learn, and it's helping me still learn in things that my own failings, my own shortcomings, that I could move forward. And I hope that's, again, what I hope everyone else is learning.
Good. We had a factoid yesterday. What Eric Beetner had his George Bush story, or no, Travis Richardson had the 9/11 story. Yeah. And it was on September 10th, 2001, George W. Bush Jr. had the worst approval rating in the history of modern presidents because of, you know, the election and then just not doing anything. But 2 days later, he had an 80% approval rating. So, you know, there's something going on in there. It just doesn't happen that, okay, the Muslim race has turned on us and you know, we got to go and go to forever war, man. That's trillions and trillions of dollars. And
sometimes I will say that Occam's razor is probably the easiest way. It's just these guys did a thing, it was terrible, and that just benefited, Bush. I think also, you have to look at how America acted in Afghanistan and how they funded against Russia. So it's
absolutely.
I think you just look at history. The dominoes are there. It's, again, I think when it comes to conspiracy theories, like with QAnon, if you look for it, you'll find it. Right. If you want the Earth to be flat, you'll make it flat somehow, no matter how much evidence you have. So,
Erica, how about your? We'll lead into Theodore Roosevelt with your little follow the bouncing ball to you here on this American experience. I guess we've turned this into, which is nice. It's nice to hear this sort of just normalcy, just coming out of us, and also acknowledging so many other things around us right now. What do you think about your place in this moment in time?
Well, one kind of fact I always like about millennials, and I'm also like Adam on the cusp.
Are you Gen X, millennial on the thing? Okay.
Technically Gen X.
Ex-millennial.
Yeah. I think they call us elder millennials sometimes, but I usually just say Gen X. But, when I started teaching, I was teaching millennials. And as a generation, they were the generation most likely to be working and going to college at the same time. And they were the generation that volunteered the most at the same time that they were getting their college educations. So there was this weird disconnect often in the media about the millennials being this kind of lazy generation. And I just was not seeing that at all. I was seeing the exact opposite in my classrooms. And it was also backed up by kind of statistics. So one thing I think it's happening with the younger generation, as Adam was mentioning, they're just a lot savvier about what's going on in the world. They don't just accept everything that they're told at 18. So they have a much kind of savvier understanding of debt, of the difficulties of sort of trying to climb out of that as a graduate. And then they're also a lot savvier about just the world they're living in, the sort of privileges that, certain people are born into, the kind of people starting kind of the race way ahead of others, and, how that actually affects your, how mobile you are, how, if you can kind of live the so-called American dream. And I think a lot of young people are realizing, for some individuals, it's actually impossible, right? That it's not, the deck is so stacked against some people right now that in the current circumstances, it is impossible. But despite that bleakness, I think the awareness could lead to change, right? This idea that young people from a much earlier age are kind of saying, no, this isn't right. And we can create a better and more just society. We just have to fight for it. We can't be passive.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, you take the 60s into consideration when the Vietnam War as a catalyst, and also the Civil Rights Act, two things that came together at the same time to bring a movement into place. And what happened is it just gave everybody stronger drugs, and it kind of, and everybody went off in that crazy 70s paranoia. So what are they going to do to us this time is what I'm saying. How are they going to get us out of this change and keep things at the status quo? And that's what we have to avoid right now. Or if it's not our turn, if after we're here, how can we avoid the pitfall of that similar, because it's always similar. It's always stems at what's needed at the time. So they're toying around now with giving us enough money to get by until we can go back out in the world, and they're just like dangling it like the Godfather strings. We have this kind of power. So they're definitely going to be playing that for the election. Put in your absentee vote for Trump now, and you'll get $600 back, something like this, and of course, some people might do that. And some people are probably taking money now. These guys that are dressed up in commando uniforms and attacking peaceful demonstrators in our cities of Portland. Now they took them out of there. Where are they going to show up next? They said Albuquerque. I haven't heard anything about Albuquerque. But I'm sure something's going to say they were sending many into Chicago, and that the mayor there said, no, you aren't. And then Trump talked to the mayor, and the mayor said, everything's fine, send them in. I don't know what's going on right now, but it's so much diversionary tactics. And every day is like seconds or like ticking. What are they going to do next? What is this people in power, the powers that be? How are we going to continue to fight them right now? I don't know. You had Teddy Roosevelt, who was a good fighter. So let's talk with Erica. I'm going to talk with Erica. You guys are probably out of M&Ms, but hang loose for a minute, and we got
Skittles.
Yeah, Skittles. All right. And so Teddy was a fighter, and he was a good fighter. He found out he was good at something, and he did it. But I don't think he was good at a lot of other things. And how he dealt with the victory and that power in those moments. He made a lot of mistakes with human lives how he went on with that. But he did a lot of great things for the parks and sorts of. What do you think about Teddy deep down?
Well, I've been interested in Teddy Roosevelt since I was in high school. So obviously I was very cool. I was a very cool kid. I was a teenager with my Teddy Roosevelt obsession. But, he kind of had these dual personalities. At least that's what we see in the history books, where I think it's always difficult to tell what someone's true personality was. But he was he was serious about conservation. He liked to kind of spend time on his own in nature. He was very kind of dedicated to kind of saving the natural beauty of the U.S. and creating these national parks and making them open to everyone, making them kind of these public places. And then on the other hand, he really liked to be at war. He was good at it. He was good at it. He was the Secretary of the Navy under McKinley. He kind of led the Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War. And he very much liked actually being at war, not just the strategy, but he liked being very active. He was a very active man his whole life. So, I think that it's, as you're saying, a lot of these people that we're talking about, they did have kind of some interesting accomplishments. I don't know much about Buchanan, and now I'm sort of, as soon as I'm going to close my computer, I'm going to go look up Buchanan.
Well, he leaned toward the South, and all of his legislation, always favored the South, in that way. That fostered the Civil War, that brought it on. So whatever else he was, that's not a good thing. He had the power to be a little different, as Teddy in a lot of ways in his, from where he went from the Spanish Civil War, which was the first real war that America was able to show who they were in the world. And you say the War of 1812. Well, we didn't have anything. We basically lost that war. We put the embargo on France and England, and realized we had no resources without them. So we're sitting there with nothing. So it was, kind of a slap in the face. And we never really won that war. That war we still believe we did. But the Spanish-American War, we won, and we certainly incorporated the Spanish into our, into America. at that time. And like I was saying, how the Spanish were utilized across the whole land to whiten a lot of the Asian peoples that were doing the work, say out west and in Hawaii especially. But they weren't in such good shape when we attacked Cuba and those places. And there were Black Americans, men, soldiers who fought with Teddy Roosevelt at San Juan Hill, and they weren't treated very well. So there's a statue here in New York at the Museum of Natural History that has him, looking like the white savior to a couple of primitive looking blacks, and they're going to be tearing that down, I think, if they haven't already. And he didn't really want it. His relatives now, his ancestors, say, get rid of that. That's not it. We don't want that here, because everyone was faulted at that time from the beginning, having slavery and then not coming good after the Civil War. And still 50 years after that, 40, 30 years when Teddy was around, a lot more could have been done. And all of a sudden the door opened to Woodrow Wilson, who was, one of the most vile racists that ever walked the face of the earth, and with the things he did to the White House and racism. So no wonder we're having a resurgence now that these things were allowed in there. But Teddy, I think he fought for the good as much as he could at that time. But he certainly had a racist edge. But why don't we listen to your story, which is, I love your story. I love his niece and all these great little things. It's called The Great Compromise of 1901, right?
That's right.
Okay,
This is written when he was vice president. He was vice president very briefly because
right when McKinley was shot. So you take it on, Erica Wright and Theodore Roosevelt. What was he, number 26?
Ooh, I don't know. That sounds about right.
I think he was. Okay. Erica Wright.
All right. So this is The Great Compromise of 1901. Teddy Roosevelt was a vice president at the time. And sort of the little nugget of my story was he wasn't very happy being vice president because he was a very active man. So he was idle for these months. And so I kind of imagine what would happen to someone who was used to be very active, who had a little too much time on his hands. And I'm reading from the book. I noticed that Greg and Adam were very smart to have it on their screen. So I'm sorry, you're going to have to look kind of at my forehead. The body looked as fresh as the day a .30 caliber ball cartridge entered its right abdomen, rupturing the small appendix, nicking the pancreas, and exploding out the back. Remarkably, no bones were broken by the bullet's journey, though the victim's subsequent fall did shatter 3 ribs, which had to be repaired before being wrapped, like the rest of the skeleton, in thread. Of course, that was easy enough. There's a joke that the colonel wrote himself in a little notebook, typically kept for a supply inventory and specimen dimensions. How do you skin a huntsman? Trigger finger first. The colonel stepped away from the neck to survey his progress. To be sure, working with feathers and furs was easier, but he tanned the skin first. He hoped that the wax and arsenic solution created some stability as well. And to think, only a few months earlier, he despaired that he'd ever do anything more than ducks. Most importantly, the body was upright again, could be swirling a brandy and holding court at a salon. Well, aside from the nudity, of course, though the colonel had tied an apron across the genitalia, which had mostly been recreated from clay anyway, artistic license and such. It was hardly improper and would be covered by a sturdy fabric, he imagined. Most people think that taxidermy requires a butcher knife, something ghastly and rigid, but a small, flexible blade does the best work. And the colonel kept a set of them sharpened at all times should a request come tapping at the inconspicuous door on Wallach Street. Thankfully, the subject had been frozen rather than salted, making it easy to scrape off all the meat and blood. And he'd been a lean man, rendering the question of fat almost negligible. Yes, indeed, the colonel considered himself lucky. He hummed a little as he considered the empty sockets, deciding that he'd make a special trip for the glass eyes, Nothing on hand quite suited the senator from Colorado. Had the original been brown or blue, he'd quite forgotten in his rush to incinerate the offal. In his state of deep concentration, he didn't notice the door behind him opening, nor did the sound of slippered feet disturb him. Lee had always been a small woman. She'd worn wool on purpose to avoid the rustling of muslin, silk, or, God forbid, chiffon. She liked to sneak, not unlike the bevy of pets, live ones, she kept at her residence. Perhaps their little faces are why she always had trouble admiring the work in front of her, though everyone said that her father was a natural. What else would they have said, though? An eccentric, more like, she thought, unimpressed by the fox staring morosely at her as if its soul awaited rescue. She turned to the mounted bass, a little disquieted but resolved in her mission. The man must be stopped. "Creature comforts," she said, pleased when the colonel jumped. His startled expression quickly hardened, and he wiped his blade on a leather strip, as if to remind the young socialite that she stepped into his lair, not the other way around. "As quiet as your company, I see." "Too honored to speak, I'm sure. You would descend to me?" A single flight were hardly in the bowels. Lee felt that the new electric light bulbs were too bright, casting long shadows of tails and claws on the far wall. They did, however, give her a clear view of her opponent, fit and formidable. His hair slicked away from his face without any apparent attempt at style. Combed himself, of course, after washing his face, he smelled like tobacco and salt. "You've come to admire my handiwork, then?" "I've come to request you stop." The colonel's mouth turned, a cruel edge to the look. "And who are you to make such a demand?" Lee looked down at the tools next to her hand, surprised at how many she could name. Glover's needles, lip tuckers, tumblers, and shears. She'd spent too much time there, coming to appreciate being unsettled. Her safe, predictable world upturned. Everywhere else, you said, everywhere else you went, the young Miss Roosevelt was coddled or adored, often both. She knew she was considered handsome as her mother had been, but more than that, she was fearless like her father. Unlike her father, she had rare opportunities to bare her teeth. Yet here she was, late and alone in a plain wool day dress. She selected the ear opener, liked the handles fit neatly in her palm. Who am I? A woman with your best interest at heart. A woman with the ear of a president, even. She held up her tool at the little pun, but the colonel didn't smile. A girl, surely. On that much we can agree. Not since last March, I'm afraid. Full grown now, they say. Ready to make an acceptable match, etc. The colonel listened to her, but let his hands move back to the neck and the tricky business of veins. Fake, of course. The vascular system could never be saved. It wouldn't matter with a mink, but with a man... He reached for another link of copper wire. If you had caught me on Tuesday, perhaps, but now I've made too much progress. Lee glanced finally at the senator, relieved that his face didn't look familiar, though they had met. His concave torso made her cringe. How had they arrived at this moment? And how far would she go to protect her own ambitions? Thank you.
So is that telling about you there? How far you would go to? Is that, are you like giving away a little something there?
I don't know that I would. I don't know. I would attack a president, especially with some taxidermy tools.
Yeah. No, but given that position, maybe. But in your own way, maybe you were, finding some subconscious part of yourself there.
Well, Alice is a very fun historical character, and I actually wanted to write a story about Alice. But my idea just didn't quite go anywhere. She did keep a bevy of pets at the White House. She had a green snake that would get lost quite often. Its name was Emily Spinach. So the staff would have to go in search of her green snake. She was just very outspoken, especially for her age and time. So even when as a kind of teenager and as a very young woman in DC, she was always very outspoken and about a variety of topics. There was a kind of scandalous story that doesn't sound particularly scandalous now, but she was on some sort of kind of overseas relations trip, sort of foreign relations trip, and she went swimming in her underthings with several senators. The underthings, of course, would have covered much more than our modern day swimsuits. And she said something to the effect. So the newspapers asked her about it and were very scandalized. And she said, what's the difference between this and a dress? It's, practically the same. So she didn't really, she was not embarrassed and did not apologize for this incident.
Good for her. Well, let's bring our cohorts back. But you mentioned snakes just a minute ago. So I wanted to continue with you about you have a new book coming out of snakes.
I do. I have a collection of essays about snakes coming out in just about a month.
Oh, right. All right.
Yeah.
So in September?
In September, yeah. September 3rd.
And what's the name of the book?
The name's very creatively titled Snake.
Snake. That is creative. Snake. And how many essays are in it?
I think there's about 12 or 13.
Right.
I think that sounds right. And it's part of this series called Object Lessons that's put out by Bloomsbury, where you take a subject. There have been ones on the potato, the refrigerator, high heels. And you sort of just look at it from a variety of different angles. So it was a lot of fun. It was actually some of the most fun I've ever had writing a book, because there was just so much fascinating research involved.
All right. Well, look for Snake. How about you, Greg?
Yeah.
What's your book out now? Do you have a book out right now, or a new one? Or
no, I actually don't.
Something coming soon?
No, I need to finish something.
Okay.
Wait.
Well, you're in the faking of the president. When we can, thank you there. Look at us. The two on the bottom are screens, and they can hold their screens up at the pages. And how about you, Adam? Do you have a book coming?
There's a few things coming out. Besides Faking the President, which has been released by 3 Rooms Pressed, I just got an anthology, pulp anthology that I'm a part of from Moonstone that I'm a part of that's coming out later this year. I'm working on radio dramas at the moment. We're currently recording a continuation of the Green Llama pulp novels that I've been telling for a while with with Radio Room is the company. And I'm working on my next Green Llama novel, which is going to finish off my whole series. Then after that, I've got to start writing some original stuff. I've got some stuff in the
start a new series.
Start a new series.
There you go.
But yeah.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing Snake. Right now, we're presenting the Faking of the President 19 stories of White House Noir. And what is White House Noir? Well, you'll have to buy the book, because we invented it with this book. We've invented White House Noir, which is basically a bright light shining through all the cracks of the abuse of power, and especially absolute power. And that absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's going to be hard to keep that from happening in the future with any changes that we make. We need to be more a part of our government, as these younger people, as we've all said, are starting to realize. And I think I believe more now than I have in the past that we can actually do some damage to the damaged system. It's just basically not undamaging the damaged system, but putting in another one that can run correctly for and by and of the people. Of course, I'm a delusional idealist. I always have been. I was born. I'm a child of the '60s, but a product of the '70s, which makes me a total mess. Just coming like you, Greg. You're a product of the '70s, right? Would you say? Or?
I was 9 years old in 1970, so I would say I was mostly formed by the 1970s and the early 80s.
Right. All right. Well, I don't know. Should I read the review for the New York Times? I've done that for a couple of nights. I don't have to read it all again. What do you think? Should we go through it, or it says the New York Times number 3? How about this? We were in the second 2 weeks in a row. We made the New York Times. This was the next week, and we were right under the bestsellers, which I think is right in the back. Oh no, one more in. And this is a quickie, so we can all live with this. Here's my glasses. I think it's 3 sentences. So here's a little. It was under the bestsellers, Here it is, and it's way down. I always push the wrong way. It's down there somewhere. Anyhow, the faking of the president. This anthology of political fictions recast presidential history in some audacious ways. It recasts political fictions, presidential history in some audacious ways. In one, Tipper Gore and Laura Bush duke it out to settle the 2000 election, which
that really happened, right?
I wish it did, but in Eric Beetner's story, of course, it comes out as history came out. Darn Laura Bush gets in the good shot, and of course Cheney's there to cheer her on. So and that's really what happened ultimately. It is. I mean, it might as well be the truth. One day you're on the lowest of the totem pole, and then two buildings come down, and you have the highest approval rate. This is what we're talking about with this chief executive and chief we have here in this country, and how the powers have been abused, and especially now with 45. There was that cartoon going around which said they won't have 45th floors in any more buildings in the future because of 45 now, because of Trump. So they will cancel any 45th floor, just like 13. They do now. That's how bad this guy is. So all we got to do is move on to November and vote him out and move forward. And people say, hey, I'm sorry, what if he doesn't leave? He's going to leave. We're going to come down and get some Kool-Aid, some tea from Erica. We're going to stop there. Adam's coming with us, and Greg's coming up, and we're going. I'll take a bullet right here. I'll be the first 40,000 people, and then the next 40,000 will get through. We're going to win. We're going to beat the fascists again, just like D-Day, if that's what it takes, come November 3rd. But our vote will get out. I feel good about it. And then I wake up and I'm like, I've got Trump derangement syndrome. Things are just so strange. How do you feel about the near future, Erica? Are we gonna pull through?
I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. Again, I have a lot of faith in the youngest people in the U.S. right now.
I agree.
I think we're going to have record turnout for young American voters, and that in itself is going to be exciting.
Yes. I think that in the 60s, the difference is they didn't turn out to vote. They were against that. They were against those things, which is why it was a landslide for Nixon in 72. Forget about it, the worst landslide. What about you, Adam?
Like Erica, cautiously optimistic. I would like to believe that we're facing a existential threat to our way of life and way of life in the world, and I really believe that the young people they're willing to march in the streets. They are willing to vote, and despite the fact that he's trying to put it down, mail-in voting is becoming increasingly an option, and I think that will make it easier for young people to vote because it's less of a burden. I feel like we've been sitting on our TV and our computers for months, and here comes my cat to let you know that it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine, guys. Puck Christopher Noodles wants you all to know that it's going to be great, and I really need to feed him soon. And here's his butt. So to answer your question, I think it's going to be fantastic.
Good. Well, we need to hear that sort of thing. Greg, are you going to continue the fantastical?
Yeah, I think that we've always course corrected. I mean, again, not the first, hopefully the last time we've had to have a major course correction in this country. Hopefully this time it won't require a civil war. But the good news about that is the last time that happened, they were stomped into the dirt. So,
yeah.
So you know, as at least in recent history, the last few centuries or so, fascism generally doesn't. Totalitarianism and fascism generally does not come out on top in the long run. So, unfortunately, we have some people in this country, as we've found to our great dismay, are all in favor of that kind of, leadership. As long as they're not the ones being victimized by it, they're all for it. And actually, coming from the rural South, this did not come as a huge surprise to me.
Well, it's white supremacy, it's white supremacy.
Didn't come as a huge surprise to me. It was really, I've spent a lot of the last 15, 20 years or so saying to my friends who are involved in politics, like, I told you, they just hate you. They just hate us. That's all there is to it. And you can't reason with that. So there's no working with that. There's no reasoning with that. And unfortunately, all you can do is vote them out and grind them into the dust of history.
I mean, you would have figured most of them would have died off by now.
Evil never dies.
No, you're right. It's like the guy yesterday, whatever, Gombert. What's his name? Gombert. I don't even, who is there? Yeah. The doctor, the doctor should have said to him, they found out he was getting on Air Force One. They should have said, go get on the plane with the dude, man. He's going to love talking to you. I mean, I know a Hippocratic oath, but in that particular moment, you look around this land and you say, I've got this in my control. I would have put that dude, I would have put him on. Well, you know what I did in my story with him. So, I'm ready to go. I'm ready for removal, with extreme prejudice. All right. So I guess what do we do? An hour and a half? Where are we? 1:31. Look at that. What a nice time with everyone. And we sure miss Christopher Chambers and Kate Flora. We missed them, and we're very thankful to everybody else who was with us the last couple of nights. We do have the book available right here at the bottom of the screen, threeroomspress.com shop. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any indie bookstore you go to. You can order this book anywhere online in the world even. So, hey, he pulled his out. All right. And he's holding up his screen. So it was an honor, like I said, to have all three of you in this book. And
it was fun to be in it. Thank you.
It's such great stories that are coming from so many different places. Kind of a magic realism, kind of a modern drama, a melodrama kind of a thing. But I really liked it, and I love every one of these stories, and I'm especially happy to wind up our New York Times tour with you three here on the screen with me. So we're going to say goodbye to you at home or wherever you might be. Hopefully you're not in a bar and not social distancing, watching this on the TV. We don't want that. I don't think they do that. I don't think you would do that at a bar. Watch our cast, but who knows? Maybe in the future, this will be the future. So I'm going to end the broadcast, and then we'll be here for a second. And